Good, and thank you. Excuse me. Good, and thank you for that kind introduction. It's an honor to be here. In the final months of World War II, Western leaders convened the greatest economic minds of their generation. Their task? To build a new financial system. At a quiet resort high up in the mountains of New Hampshire, they laid the foundation for Pax Americana. The architects of Bretton Woods recognized that a global economy required global coordination. To encourage that coordination, they created the IMF and the World Bank. These twin institutions were born after a period of intense geopolitical and economic volatility. The purpose of the IMF and the World Bank was to better align national interest with international order, thereby bringing stability to an unstable world. In short, their purpose was to restore and preserve balance. This remains the purpose of the Bretton Woods institutions. Yet everywhere we look across the international system today, we see imbalance. The good news, it doesn't have to be this way. My goal this morning is to outline a blueprint to restore equilibrium to the global financial system and the institutions designed to uphold it. I have spent the bulk of my career from the outside looking in on financial policy circles. Now I am on the inside looking out. I am eager to work with each of you to restore order to the international system. To achieve this, however, we must first reconstruct the IMF and World Bank reconnect the IMF and the World Bank with their founding missions. The IMF and World Bank have enduring value, but mission creep has knocked these institutions off course. We must enact key reforms to ensure the Bretton Woods institutions are serving their stakeholders, not the other way around. Bringing balance back to global finance will require clear-eyed leadership from the IMF and World Bank. This morning, I will explain how they can provide that leadership to build safer, stronger, and more prosperous economies all around the world. I wish to invite my international counterparts to join us in working toward these goals. On this point, I wish to be clear. America first does not mean America alone. To the contrary, it is a call for deeper collaboration and mutual respect among trade partners. Far from stepping back, America First seeks to expand U.S. leadership in international institutions like the IMF and the World Bank. By embracing a stronger leadership role, America First seeks to restore fairness to the international economic system. Nowhere is the imbalance I mentioned earlier more obvious than in the world of trade. That's why the United States is taking action now to rebalance global commerce. For decades, successive administrations relied on faulty assumptions that our trading partners would implement policies that would drive a balanced global economy. Instead, we face the stark reality of large and persistent U.S. deficits as a result of an unfair trading system. Intentional policy choices by other countries have hollowed out America's manufacturing sector and undermined our critical supply chains, putting our national and economic security at risk. President Trump has taken strong actions to address these imbalances and the negative impacts they have on Americans. This status quo of large and persistent imbalances is not sustainable. It is not sustainable for the United States, and ultimately, it is not sustainable for other economies. Now, I know sustainability is a popular term around here, but I'm not talking about climate change or carbon footprints. I'm talking about economic and financial stability, the kind of sustainability that raises standards of living and keeps markets afloat. International financial institutions must be singularly focused on upholding this kind of sustainability if they are to succeed in their missions. In response to President Trump's tariff announcements, more than 100 countries have approached us, wanting to help rebalance global trade. These countries have responded openly and positively to the President's actions to create a more balanced international system. We are engaged in meaningful discussions and look forward to talking with others. China, in particular, is in need of a rebalancing. Recent data shows the Chinese economy tilting even further away from consumption toward manufacturing. China's economic system, with growth driven by manufacturing exports, will continue to create even more serious imbalances with its trading partners if the status quo is allowed to continue. China's current economic model is built on exporting its way out of its economic troubles. It's an unsustainable model that is not only harming China, but the entire world. China needs to change. The country knows it needs to change. Everyone knows it needs to change, and we want to help it change because we need rebalancing too. China can start by moving its economy away from export overcapacity and towards supporting its own consumers and domestic demand. Such a shift would help with global rebalancing that the world desperately needs. Of course, trade is not the only factor in broader global economic imbalances. The persistent over-reliance on the United States for demand is resulting in an ever more unbalanced global economy. Some countries' policies encourage excess savings, which holds back private sector-led growth. Others keep wages artificially depressed, which also suppresses growth. These practices contribute to global dependence on U.S. demand to spur growth. They also lead to a global economy that is weaker and more vulnerable than it should be. In addition to increasing energy access, the World Bank can use its resources more effectively by starting to apply its graduation policy. This would allow the bank to focus on lending to poorer, less creditworthy countries. This is where World Bank support makes the biggest difference for poverty and growth. Instead, the World Bank continues to lend every year to countries that have met the criteria to graduate from World Bank borrowing. There is no justification for this continued lending. It siphons off resources from higher priorities and crowds out the development of private markets. It also disincentivizes countries' efforts to move away from dependency on the World Bank and toward job-rich, private sector-led growth. Going forward, the bank must set firm graduation timelines for countries that have long since met the graduation criteria. Treating China, the second largest country in the world, as a developing country is absurd. While it has been at the expense of many Western markets, China's rise has been rapid and impressive. If China wants to play a role in the global economy commensurate with its actual importance, then the country needs to graduate up. We welcome that. The World Bank should also implement transparent procurement policies based on best value. It must help countries move away from procurement approaches that prioritize only the lowest cost bids. Related to this subject, I wish to send a strong, and I emphasize strong, message about procurement policies as regards Ukraine. No one who financed or supplied the Russian war machine will be eligible for funds earmarked for Ukraine's reconstruction. No one. To conclude, I invite our allies to work with us as we rebalance the international financial system, refocus the IMF and World Bank on their founding charters. America First means we are doubling down on our engagement with the international economic system, including at the IMF and the World Bank. A more sustainable economic system will be one that better serves the interests of the United States and all the other participants in the system. We look forward to working with all of you in this endeavor. Thank you.
Mr. Secretary, thank you for joining us here today. China obviously is an important part of this administration's foreign and economic policy. You'll be meeting with your Chinese counterparts. What will you tell them in the sense of how they obviously are aware that there's huge imbalances, their manufacturing capacity is enormous, especially in things like automobiles. How will you help them understand that it's not just about talking, it's about executing?
Well, look, I don't think I have to help them understand. I think they understand very well. And it's just a matter of impetus and will. So I believe I first went to Japan in 1990, 91, within 12 months of the peak of the bubble. A decade of that unwind, a decade of malaise. And then in 2012, I ran across a fellow, 2011, who was running for prime minister named Shinzo Abe, and he knew that Japan needed change and implemented it very quickly. 10 years later, more than 10 years later, Japan has had a remarkable economic run, and I think that our Chinese counterparts that will come to this realization, and if some of our policies, sometimes it takes an external push.
Right.
Alternatively, what I have said previously, there is an opportunity for a big deal here, that the U.S. is looking to rebalance to more manufacturing. The identity of that would be less consumption. If China is serious on less dependence on export-led manufacturing growth and a rebalancing toward a domestic economy, I think they use the term dual circulation.
Right.
Well, right now it's really singular circulation. And if they want to rebalance, let's do it together. This is an incredible opportunity.
And the World Bank, you discussed about graduating the medium-sized countries that should have graduated some time ago. That changes the commercial model of the World Bank, but obviously you think that's important, that they need to be graduated.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, it's just, as President Trump says, it's common sense that you can't have the second largest economy in the world. And it's as I said in my speech, I applaud their rapid growth, but you don't get both. I have a teenager who sometimes wants to be treated like a child, sometimes wants to be treated like an adult. And
I got one of those too.
Yeah. It's an adult economy.
In the final minute or two, let me just turn to financial intermediation. What is your vision, especially for the U.S., in terms of financial regulation? What do you want the industry to look like? Obviously, the capital markets of the U.S. is a crown jewel of this economy. How should we encourage that not only here, but abroad?
Well, I think that I've been getting a lot of questions on private credit, and I think that private credit is an interesting addition to the U.S. mosaic, and it is the depth and breadth of our capital and credit markets that powers the U.S. economy, and it's the innovation there. I think that private credit's a very new and interesting part, but it is happening outside of the regulated ecosystem.
Right.
I convened something in the U.S. called FSOC, the Financial Stability Oversight Council, which convenes the regulators, and I think through partnership with the three U.S. banking regulators, Federal Reserve, Controller of the Currency, and the FDIC, we can come up with a system that makes the regulated financial system prosper again. And what the U.S. has that is different than most other G7 countries is just the number of financial institutions.
Right.
We don't have 5 big banks, 3 big banks. And in the U.S., the community and small banks, which are provides 70% of agricultural lending,
Right.
40% of small business lending, 40% of real estate lending. And in the U.S., we've had this incredible boom on Wall Street. I think Wall Street can continue doing well. But I think it's Main Street's turn to share in the prosperity. And I think it was the pullback by the small banks, the post the GFC, that's kind of created this stagnation on Main Street. And we're determined to fix that.